Good morning. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Dan Wall, President of Bradley Hospital. Every year, Bradley and Lifespan Community Health Institute host this community event as a way of sharing expert advice on caring for children, along with our knowledge of children's mental health. Bradley Hospital, a major teaching affiliate at the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University, remains at the forefront of research into childhood psychiatric illness. And today's workshop presenters are some of the field's most respected clinicians, educators, and researchers. Our keynote speakers, Amy L. Kennedy of the Kennedy Forum and Bradley's Dr. Gregory Fritz, will lead an informal and interactive conversation with all of you about pathways to improving mental health services and education. I also want to recognize in the audience today the gentleman who escorted Mrs. Kennedy to Barrington today, her husband, Patrick. Thank you for being here, Patrick. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Marge Pazione, Director of Clinical Innovation at Bradley Hospital, to come up and say a few words. Marge.
Welcome to Parenting Matters on this gorgeous, almost spring day. We're almost there. So I'd like to just take a few moments to tell you about a couple of programs at Bradley, given that our topic today is mental health in the school. So these are two programs that are run collaboratively between Bradley Hospital and Gateway Healthcare Services. The first is a program called Kids Link, and it's kind of a one-stop hotline for children, adolescents, and families who might be experiencing some kind of emotional crisis. We welcome you to call us anytime, 24/7. Remember that in a crisis, you are not alone. In January alone, the hotline received 581 calls. So there are plenty of people out there, and there's help out there if you just give us a call. Families have called about kids who are depressed, who are scared, who are struggling in various areas, having difficulty in schools, worried there might be a very quick change in eating pattern or sleeping pattern. The service is free and confidential, and there's the phone number, and you can also find the phone number on the Bradley website, which is bradleyhospital.org. Second program I'd like to tell you about is the Bradley Gateway Mental Health First Aid Program. You might have heard of mental health first aid. It's gotten a lot of coverage in the press. So mental health first aid is very similar to American Heart Association or Red Cross CPR or first aid in the sense that it trains folks to provide an intervention or to step into a crisis just for the moment until professional help can be obtained. The course is an 8-hour course. It's appropriate for anyone 18 years of older who would like to learn more about mental illness. Although mental health professionals are welcome to participate, this is really a program designed for the folks on Main Street. Upon completion of the course, participants are certified in mental health first aid for 3 years. And there are a whole collection of different curriculum, but the two that are most popular are the adult curriculum and the youth, which is designed for kids 12 to 18. So mental health first aid was originally created in Australia in 2001, and the National Council for Behavioral Health helped bring the curriculum to the United States in 2008. And their goal is to make mental health first aid as commonplace as CPR. The program at the moment is in 23 countries, and in the United States alone, we have over 540,000 mental health first aiders. The program is included in SAMHSA's National Registry for Evidence-Based Programs, and it helps to do a number of different things: increase knowledge and understanding of folks with mental illness, encourages people to be helpful, it supports people getting help, and it decreases social distance, and helps to reduce some of the stigma for folks experiencing a mental health, emotional crisis, or substance abuse issue. We are out there reaching all kinds of folks, and just in the last year alone, so this is the calendar year 2016, we have trained, so this is the Bradley Gateway team, have trained folks from the Office of the Mental Health Advocate, from DCYF, from the Department of Health, from businesses and corporations in the area, such as Amica, who trained a very large contingent of their staff. We've trained folks in the schools, both on the public side, the private side, and the charter schools in Rhode Island. We have provided trainings for clergy, chaplains, and individuals who are leaders in faith-based communities. We've provided trainings for law enforcement at the Rhode Island Police Academy and campus security. We have provided trainings in a number of the local hospitals. And again, these are not trainings for behavioral health specialists. These are folks who might be in a position to intervene in a crisis, but don't have a behavioral health background or specialty themselves. On the social service side, we have trained folks at the Institute for Nonviolence, the Rhode Island Mentoring Partnership, YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, the Women's Resource Center, the Rhode Island Food Bank. Higher education, we are training a good deal of the faculty and service providers at the Brown Outlet School of Medicine, CCRI, URI, Rick Risdy, and UMass at Dartmouth. We have adopted mental health first aid as a best practice at both Bradley and Gateway, in that all of our frontline providers, so these are folks who are the receptionists, patient registration, human resources, and security, are all certified in mental health first aid. So we encourage you to, if you would like to learn more about the program, our program coordinator, her name is Kim LaFountain, has a table out at the exhibitors area, so please stop by and visit with her, or go on to BradleyGatewayMentalHealthFirstAid.org to learn more about the program. All right, next up, it is my pleasure to introduce our panel moderator. So if our panelists would like to come join us, that would be super. Great to sit there right in the spotlight. Thank you, folks. Great. So our panel moderator this morning is Carrie Bridges Felice. She is the Director of Community Health Institute at Lifespan. In case you're not familiar, the Lifespan Community Health Institute works to ensure that all people have the opportunities to achieve their optimal state of health through healthy behaviors, healthy relationships, and healthy environments. Carrie has an extensive background in public health, having served as the team lead for the health disparities and access to care at the Rhode Island Department of Health, and as a public health prevention specialist for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In addition to public health, Carrie also has experience in education and developing partnerships. Most recently, she was the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the Providence Public School Department, where she built collaborative relationships between the district, community-based organizations, and national partners to improve student well-being and their academic performance. A resident of Providence, Carrie earned her bachelor's degree in biology from Duke and her master's degree in public health from Boston University School of Public Health. So let's give a warm welcome to
Good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to see you back here again for Parenting Matters, both old faces and new. So thank you for coming out to join us. Clearly, and thank you, Marge, for the introduction. Clearly, I'm trying to be like Marge when I grow up, and I'm wearing the outfit. I've got the uniform down. It's an expectation, exactly. It's an expectation. You work with Parenting Matters, you wear the uniform. So thank you. And I also want to thank and acknowledge Bonnie Braga on our team in the Community Health Institute, who has done yeoman's work to organize this conference for 27 years. So before I introduce Amy and Greg to you formally, I just want to take a moment and set the stage, so to speak. I want to share with you the important experience and findings from the Bradley Hospital Community Health Needs Assessment that was conducted in the spring, summer of last year, of 2016. The Community Health Needs Assessment is an opportunity for us every few years to pause and listen. Listen to what the concerns are of the community that we serve and have that inform our investments of time, talent, and treasure to do the best that we can to be responsive to those concerns. So I want to share with you what we did and what we heard. So this is a wordier way of saying what I just said. The Community Health Needs Assessment is done every few years. It informs our planning, and it gives us an opportunity to measure progress when we check in every few years. The process that we went through to gather input in 2016 was a little bit different than what we've done previously. It was different in that we hired community liaisons, folks who have utilized services at Bradley or who work with parents and families and kids who utilize services at Bradley Hospital to help us recruit our neighbors to come and tell us about their experiences. So we hired 2 folks who helped us organize these 5 community forums at the locations that you see here on this slide. We had 47 people come out. These were in the evenings and weekends, and we really appreciated all the input that we had. At those forums, Chris Brown, and is Chris in the room? Chris is in the back, also in the uniform, the red and black uniform this morning. Chris Brown, if you don't know, you need to know, is a wonderful community advocate and employee working with families at Bradley Hospital. Chris served as our hospital liaison and worked with our community liaisons to co-facilitate these 5 forums. And they really asked 3 questions. They presented some data to kind of get everyone on the same page to start with, but then spent the bulk of the time listening to the participants' answers about what their health concerns are, how they would prioritize them. We wanted to get to the top 3 to 5 concerns, and then what they would like to see Bradley Hospital do in response. Some of the things that we heard are things that Bradley Hospital can influence. Some of the things we heard are things that we don't control, but we can share the feedback with organizations that do influence those issues. Regardless, it was important for us to hear from the families that we serve or the families that we could be serving. So with that, let me tell you what we heard. We heard that there were these 3 main categories of concern, and these have now become the 3 main areas in which we will be working over the next 3 years. In fact, it's already begun. We're halfway through the first year. But this year and for the next 2 years to be responsive to what we heard. We heard concerns around access to services, evaluation of patients at the emergency department and then the transition to Bradley Hospital, and transition services for children who age out of pediatric care. Let me just tell you a little bit more about each of those because it will inform the discussion that we have with Greg and Amy in just a moment. So just briefly around access to services, Bradley Hospital is going to focus on expanding access to clinical and community-based services to meet the increasing demand. That means new collaborations to better serve the community. That means allocating resources to high-need areas, coordinating care Across existing programs, we heard a lot of concerns around the handoffs and coordination of services, and instituting strategies to improve physical and geographic barriers to access to services. So we'll be doing we have a number of strategies outlined to address that over the coming years. For emergency department evaluation, Bradley's going to be working with emergency departments to improve the coordination of ED evaluations for children and better manage mental and behavioral health care for pediatric patients. And again, a number of specific strategies in that area. And then transition services for children who age out of pediatric care. So this is where Bradley will again be partnering with state agencies and exploring other strategies to provide the infrastructure needed to help families in the years after they transition. Bradley will continue to advise and collaborate with state and healthcare agencies that manage transition services to improve continuity for patients and families. I encourage you to, before I encourage you, let me just also share. As I mentioned before, there were some things that Bradley Hospital can kind of own or lead on, and then there were some things that we heard that we don't control, but we want to influence. And so I want to acknowledge that we also heard concerns around transportation, particularly in South County, being a challenge of access to services. That we heard a lot of interest in Bradley offering continuing education for parents and professionals, like Parenting Matters Conference and the Parenting Matters workshops and the Bradley series, and doing more of and better advertising the continuing education available. We also heard about discontinuity between behavioral health providers and schools. We'll be hearing a bit more about that in our conversation this morning. Help to inform the selection of this topic for Parenting Matters. We heard concerns around abuse and trauma and substance abuse and just needing to be sensitive to this and focus on it. And you heard Marge talk about mental health first aid as one preventive and support system that we can put in place for everyone. And then we also heard concerns around housing instability and how housing instability impacts the health of patients at Bradley Hospital. So again, we may not be able to change it ourselves, but we can lift up that concern and share it with folks and work in partnership with folks who can help to address these. Now, I want to encourage you to read the full report, the full Community Health Needs Assessment Report. If you go to Lifespan, you'll see our fancy new website. It truly is much more user-friendly, much more easier to access resources. And if you go to this page, our community page, you can read more about the process and you can access the Community Health Needs Assessment Report for Bradley Hospital and for each of our hospitals. And with that, I would like to introduce our conversants. Is that the right word? People who have a conversation? Conversants? Amy Kennedy is the Education Director for the Kennedy Forum. Amy provides consultation services that emphasize evidence-based research and programming to affect policy change involving education and mental health. She also serves on the board of Mental Health America, a leading national advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C. That organization focuses on giving a voice to all people with mental health conditions and addictions. Amy was an educator for 15 years. She was saying before we started, coming into a school is like coming home. She's very comfortable here this morning. She has 15 years experience in public schools where she used her experience as a parent to promote the importance of social and emotional learning and the development of mental wellness for children and adolescents. She and her husband, former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, are the proud parents of 4 children, and they currently live in New Jersey. And then our own from Bradley Hospital, Greg Fritz. Dr. Fritz is the Associate Chief and Director for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. His research interests deal with the mind-body interactions and chronic medical illness. And he studied psychophysiology of asthma disparities, the psychology of physical symptoms, sociocultural factors affecting disease management, and physician-patient interactions. Dr. Fritz is the Academic Director of Bradley Hospital and the Director of Bradley Hasbro Children's Research Center. He's the Director of the Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at Rhode Island Hospital, as well as Professor and Director of the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior at the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University. As you can tell, we have experts here to share with us this morning, and please give them a warm welcome. working well for everybody? Excellent. So what I'm going to do is we're going to have a conversation. As you can see, we've got the comfy chairs, we've got the plant. Picture we're in your living room. And we're going to spend a few minutes talking, because I realize I move away from the mic. We'll spend a few minutes with me asking some questions in conversation with Greg and Amy, and then we'll be sure to leave time for you all to ask some questions. So be thinking about what questions you might want to ask before we close this session. Okay. So both to open for both Dr. Fritz and Amy, welcome and thank you. Can you just briefly help us to get to know you a little bit better? You read the bios with the academic information, the professional information, but what is your motivation or what brings you passion for the work that you're doing, each of you? Amy, I'd like to start.
First, I'd like to thank you for having me here, and Bradley, Dan, for bringing this to a place that I feel like is comfortable for families. You know, we're in a school building to come to the kids' musicals and their games, and this is a nice place to talk about mental health too, where we can feel really at home. I particularly feel comfortable here because I started in a classroom. Both my parents were teachers. I went into teaching and really enjoyed teaching, but also felt at times frustrated because I had students that I didn't feel like I could reach. No matter how many times I called home or had them stay after to do extra work, they were still struggling. Yet I didn't really have any tools or know what to do with those students. And that led me to look for some answers. Of course, when Patrick and I met, and he was focused on mental health, it was like the light bulb. This is what's missing. This is what I need in my classroom to help address the issues that my students are dealing with that my history lesson isn't going to cover. So that really got me involved.
Thank you. How about you, Dr. Fritz?
Well, let's see.
It wasn't great before. What was the question?
I was an undergrad at Brown, and I was an American Lit major. And I loved reading about the human condition, and it felt to me like reading novels really, just broadening my experience and I love trying to understand what was going on in the books. So when I went to medical school, I sort of gravitated toward psychiatry because it turns out, at least as I think of it, trying to understand patients is pretty much related to trying to understand what's going on in a novel. And at least they're in the same direction. So that's how I gravitated towards psychiatry versus surgery. I almost went into surgery. I did a surgical internship, and I like doing things with my hands. So now I do woodwork instead of surgery, and I do psychiatry. But it's and then the way one becomes a child psychiatrist is first you have to have training in adult psychiatry. Why that is and why it's not the reverse, I can't answer. But I had very little exposure to child psychiatry during 3 years of residency. And then when I did start seeing kids and working with kids, it was like, wow, this is really fun. And sometimes I refer to myself as a childish psychiatrist because it is really a joy to work with children. And it also feels like you're working with nature because children have this natural instinct or they're programmed to develop and to keep growing and reaching their potential. And I think of our job as child mental health professionals is just to, sometimes kids get caught in the bushes of the river of development, and we just push them out back into the current, and there they go. And so working with nature as opposed to paddling against the current, which I feel like as an old guy now, and that's what I'm doing. And it's a very different experience than working with children.
I love that image, getting caught in the bushes, just kind of stuck in the brush and pushing back out into the current. That's a great image. Thank you. Amy, you've written about the 5 pillars, and we've included in the packets for this morning Because I feel like those are ways to push kids out of the brush.
Right, yeah. We're really interested at Kennedy Forum in how we can make schools work better. Like, the system we need for healthcare that we're still debating, and the system that we would need in our schools that would include collaboration with groups like Lifespan right within the school building. It would include screening for our students. I was always struck by teaching in my classroom and having the nurse call down for students to be screened for scoliosis. And I thought, well, okay, so we're in the middle of our lesson and they're getting called down for scoliosis. How many kids have scoliosis? This is really, nice that our school screens for it, but never was there a screening for their brain. Here we are in an institution of learning. We're focused on their brains, and yet we're not screening for any conditions that might be affecting their learning. And it just seemed like we were missing that important piece. Within our pillars, we're really looking to add support in the school, as well as collaboration, and for how we can use prevention and early intervention in our schools.
So you talked about screening for the brain, and you talked about working in schools and feeling like you weren't having the outcome or the connections you wanted for kids. Would it be fair for me to say that what might have been getting in the way, or what we now have fancy language and call adverse childhood experiences, ACEs? Can you tell us a bit more, like, what are ACEs and how might that be impacting the experience of kids?
So the Adverse Childhood Experience Study was a huge study that I know most of you here, a lot of people are already in the field and may know about ACEs, but for me, as a teacher, I was never exposed to that. That was not part of my teacher preparation at Penn State. It was not something that I learned during professional development. I never heard of it. And yet it took till I was working in mental health with Patrick to hear about this adverse childhood experience study that is going to have a major impact on my students, whether they were subjected to neglect or violence in the home, if they had a parent who was incarcerated, a parent with mental illness, drug use, or alcoholism in the home. All of these factors are going to affect their trajectory, and their success could be impacted, and yet we didn't discuss that. We didn't have tools that were going to help mitigate that. We didn't have tools to help build their resiliency. And we didn't have any training on how ACEs could be, in fact, helped through a strong bond with the teacher or another adult in their life. So I was really struck by the lack of training. And as I've gone out into the field to talk to other teachers, that it's not just Northfield, my school, where I taught, that is lacking this training. But I went and spoke in Connecticut and had a teacher come up and say, my ACE score is over a 4. And I didn't know about it until you talked about that. And that's why I became a teacher. I wanted to help students who had these same life experiences that I've had. And how would that broader knowledge, disseminating that information to all teachers, really impact the way we were teaching in our classroom or connecting with students?
Dr. Fritz, building off of that, can you explain the mind-body connection and how ACEs may be impacting a child's health and well-being development?
To a degree. We don't fully know every link in the chain, but there's a strong association between the mind and the body, and these experiences, the adverse childhood experiences that happen early in childhood that Amy mentioned, those kinds of chronic stresses that children live with, because their brains are still developing, and very much so even after birth, all the way through adolescence, they're vulnerable to the impact of the environment. And these ACEs have been shown to have actual impact on the brain morphology, the size of different components of the brain, etc., which then lead to the behaviors and the emotional impact and the physical health impact of the ACEs later on in life. The important thing, a very important aspect of recognizing ACEs is that if we know who is at risk at a young age, we can attend to them and be prepared to see and to help and to intervene early with children who are showing the impact of these kinds of stresses. So it's an opportunity for targeted prevention and early intervention if we are aware of that.
So we heard, among the information presented in the slides from the Community Health Needs Assessment, we heard concerns around trauma. We heard concerns and interest in professional education about trauma and better connecting behavioral health services to schools. And we've been learning about ACEs, and as you said, continuing to learn. There's more to learn about how these adverse childhood experiences affect a child's development or an adolescent's development and adult's development all the way through the lifespan. Dr. Fritz, what are you seeing as some promising or recommended interventions that mental health or behavioral health professionals could pursue in partnership with school-based professionals to try to mitigate the effects of adverse childhood experiences?
Well, there's a whole range of approaches to helping children learn with their strengths and the approaches that they have the greatest facility with, to approaching kids in a way that that doesn't, if they're vulnerable to aggressive outbursts, for instance, we can, if we're aware of that, we can approach them less confrontationally and more able to take a softer path, that sort of thing. Those kind of skills, many teachers have those skills intuitively, I think, and that's what draws them to kids in the first place, is just that ability to connect. But if they can, through relatively brief training, can learn to have the intellectual and the philosophical background to what they're doing intuitively, it makes for good early intervention in the classroom, which is where kids spend the bulk of their time, except at home. The two biggest contexts for child development are the family and the school. So attending to this and providing resources and training, as Amy said, that teachers are interested, and assuming we build on that interest and provide the resources and the ability to ask questions and have consultation when that is needed when things are identified, can be very effective and it's sort of like expanding the mental health provider basis and improving access because we're doing it early on.
Just to tag on to that, what I've noticed is that there are a lot of teachers who intuitively, as you said, can pick up on the need for this in their classroom, but don't have a broad evidence-based approach for how to handle it. So they'll tell you, you may have one teacher who's saying, I started using meditation in my class, or we did some yoga. And then I had another teacher who said, I changed the name of in-school suspension to my restorative, thinking class. And I've done weekly calls with parents. So they're all trying to find ways to help, but they don't really have a guidebook. And we're not asking encouraging teachers to become mental health professionals. But we need to know that there's going to be somebody that, when the teacher is a professional at recognizing something's wrong, somebody's struggling, the teacher's the professional at knowing there's a red flag there with attendance, with their work, with their mood or behavior in the classroom. Everybody spots that, but not necessarily with what the intervention is going to be. So how am I going to hand that off to somebody who is a professional, and where do I turn? I wish I could have pointed parents in my district to a phone number like the one that you provided. Just say, you know, if you ever feel overwhelmed by this, here's a number you could call. When I called home, or know that there's even language that I could talk to the parents about it, because it's a really uncomfortable topic still to address. I'm really comfortable with picking up the phone and calling home to say that your child pushed somebody and, you know, they're going to have a detention. I'm not very comfortable with saying, and I think there's something behind that behavior that maybe we need to take a closer look at. I was really comfortable with calling and saying, you know, I've given study guides, they haven't turned in the last 3 assignments and they're failing their test and blah, blah, blah. But not, hey, what's behind that behavior? Maybe we need to talk about a strategy other than just academic, and here's some help. I didn't have that language, and, you know, I don't think I'm alone in that.
Amy, what you're describing probably resonates for a lot of the audience. It certainly resonates for me. I was a classroom teacher for a brief time. I was a school-based administrator briefly, and spent a little time also in the central office of the school district. And like you, I was never, at that time, I was not trained on these topics, and felt frustrated at times, and look back with some regret that I didn't know better. You know, we do the best we can with what we know at the time, and sometimes wish I could have a do-over. But schools, from the school side, are so focused on improving academic outcomes and meeting the expectations that we as families and society have of schools to produce great learners and great citizens. What is the compelling argument, or what kind of supports or structures are needed to help schools rethink their system? What do you think that the healthcare and behavioral health systems can do to better work with school systems to address this? And I'll ask Greg the same question as well.
Oh, yeah, I think there's a really compelling argument for making this the foundation of education. You know, there is such an emphasis now on state testing, on success, and to ignore the obstacles that are in the way for student learning and for students reaching their potential is a huge oversight that whether it's for the teachers to feel like they're being evaluated on student performance, and yet we're not being trained in how to maximize student potential, or whether it's the administrators that are having an overwhelming amount of discipline and crisis situations, or it's the counselors in our school who feel like they don't have the support, the staffing, or they're being pulled in directions to be administering state testing rather than focusing on their students. It's a problem throughout the whole system that has, and it's not a simple solution, but it's certainly a scientific solution that we should be addressing this first and foremost and making it a priority. Then once we're layering on the academic skills, they all are going to be better received. So, yeah.
I think it's really critical to recognize both the opportunity and the burden that is placed on educators when they are, in essence, frontline mental health professionals, which is, in many cases, that's the situation. And on one hand, if it's just something that is added to the plate with no support, with no training, It's just an unfunded mandate that schools are supposed to do. It doesn't go well and people are frustrated. But if schools have a regular relationship with a mental health professional who is known within the school, who is available to teachers for, in medicine we call it sidewalk consultation, informal discussions about does this kid need to be referred, I'm thinking of doing this, does that make sense? What's the significance of this symptom or behavior? We can sort together, the mental health professional and the educator, the teacher, or the school leaders, can distinguish between real serious mental health problems that do need referral, things that are less serious and that can be managed with a slight change in the behavioral approach to the child. But it takes a partnership, and it takes familiarity and comfort. And not every mental health professional, just like teachers don't have the necessarily have the background in mental health services, etc. Mental health professionals often aren't very comfortable in the school setting. And they think it should be like an office or like a hospital or something. And of course it isn't. So the training needs to take place on both sides so that the professionals can collaborate effectively. But when that happens, the school culture can change, the screening can be very organized and efficient, and a protocol for differentiating who needs evaluation and who doesn't can be set up. And there can be if a crisis, like say a suicide or something happens in the school, if there's already a relationship with the mental health professional in the school, it can respond very effectively to that. Without it, it's like scrambling and at the last minute and just trying to put a finger in the dike, which nobody really finds very satisfying and isn't that useful.
Thank you. Let me transition to our audience. Let me open it up for you all to ask some questions of Amy and Fred. And Bonnie and Marge will come around with microphones. We want to make sure that you speak into the mic to make sure that everyone can hear the question.
Who has a question?
Good morning. Thank you very much. Your presentation is very useful, and for me especially. I'm a school nurse in a middle school. And I'm wondering, is there a routine adverse child experience study that is utilized in the schools to then categorize children that might be in risk of problems? Do they use that routinely? Is that in the schools?
Did everyone hear that question? So if there is a routine tool used to assess a child's kind of rating on an adverse childhood experience scale that's used in schools, is there a tool?
I think that hasn't reached wide dissemination yet. There are systematic ways of assessing a child's exposure to adverse childhood experiences. I don't think that across the board those instruments are being routinely used yet. It's more the exception than the rule.
Thank you for what you're doing. I'll tell you that in my experience, our school nurse was, one of the first to see the issues, because he would call me up and say, I have so-and-so down here. Is there a test? Are they stressed? They're going home sick again. And part of our challenge is that we can't really share health information. And so at the beginning of the year, it was always difficult to find out just what was going on with trauma, maybe at home, where either the school nurse had information that they weren't able to share, or the prior year team of teachers, because we know it's, I wasn't the only one that was having a problem with a student. It probably was last year and the year before and the year before, and it might take till midway through the year that I found out just exactly what the situation was by chance at, a shared lunch period. Or some way where the student's name came up and somebody said, oh, didn't you hear so-and-so lost their parent last year? And, oh, I didn't know that. And no, the whole team knew about it last year, but we weren't informed this year. And the school nurse was really instrumental in picking up on those red flags. The screening for that isn't available in schools usually, but I know Mental Health America has assessments online that you can direct parents to. They also are making available one for adolescents. So there are screening tools that maybe are a little bit less stigmatizing to take because they're just available on the internet through maybe a reputable source like Mental Health America. I'm not just plugging that because I'm on their board. But
I just wanted to underline something that I think is really critical, which is that to help a child, it's critical that the adults care about that child and who are working with that child be able to communicate what they know from different perspectives and different backgrounds with it. And it is true that the HIPAA laws are, even when they're not exaggerated, and sometimes they are exaggerated beyond what the rules actually say, it does require getting permission. And we just have to do that. But it shouldn't be a roadblock. It's a nuisance at times. And I don't think the intent of that HIPAA is to try and keep us from communicating, but sometimes it functions that way. But when we can communicate and look at understand the different perspectives, that's when the child and the family benefit the most. So if sometimes people are annoyed by how many permissions and releases they have to do, it's a minor nuisance compared to not having the communication amongst the professionals. And from a psychiatrist's perspective, any of my trainees that I'm supervising, I always ask them, have you talked to the teacher? Because the teachers have a perspective on children. They see hundreds and hundreds of kids. They have a knowledge base about what is appropriate for fourth graders that maybe pediatricians share, but for the most part, it's a huge resource. And for me to try and make a psychiatric assessment without having input from the child's teacher, it's like doing a chin-up with one hand tied behind your back. It's very, very difficult. So this communication is really critical.
And that highlights the need for both the clinician to have a strong rapport with the parent and family, and the educator to have a strong rapport with the parent and family, because it's really going to take all three streams of expertise working in coordination and working constructively and trusting one another. And that relationship then becomes that foundation, just like addressing emotional well-being is the foundation of education in school-based settings, or should be. But that trusting relationship will make all the difference in allowing information to be shared and allowing those constructive partnerships. What other questions do we have in the audience? Marge, there's someone here behind you.
Good morning and thank you. I'm a parent and this is my first time at this conference. One of my siblings actually recommended it to me because of, I'd say my family experience, but in particular because my daughter is actually currently involved in Bradley's partial program. This is her 9th hospitalization. I share that not to complain or even gain pity, but to give a context. And I'm learning, actually from her, how to be a little more open about our experiences. My question, actually, I have a preface to my question. First of all, it's delightful to be here because I'm hearing things that are really encouraging about the, hopefully, further collaboration between education and mental health and parents and the community, etc. As a parent, I have to share that I wish every educator and everyone involved at my daughter's schools have been as open and knowledgeable as the two of you and even the people that I've interacted with while getting coffee this morning. So my question is, have you experienced, and if you have, could you share how you've navigated that? Have you experienced interacting with people, particularly at the school, whether they're colleagues who are teachers or maybe principals or just in some way involved in administration, who are not as open? They may be philosophically open to the fact that trauma and abuse and mental illness is influencing the students who are in their district. But in my experience, I have, let's see, it's 2017, so I started 5 years ago trying to get IEP testing for my daughter, but because she is a high honor roll student, it took me until this year to finally get it. And I know legally that I could have gotten it before, but what would happen to me, I confess, I would go into a meeting determined to get it, and it's like someone brought in a bouquet of poppies, and I left that meeting going, I don't know what just happened and why I agreed to not do that. I have a lot more awareness about how that happened now, but I'm saying I'm sure that my experience is not unique for parents, which is hard because I am essentially working at this with my daughter now full-time, and financially that's been devastating. I'm a single parent, etc., etc. I think I've given probably plenty of context. I'd love to hear some tips and some advice on how to navigate people in the industry and in the educational institutions who are not like you.
I really applaud you because your daughter, despite the struggles she's having, is so lucky to have you as an advocate and informed and supporting her. And then I'd like to, just reiterate that I wasn't this teacher. I really wasn't that. I've come to this understanding really more through my growth in understanding of mental health. So I wasn't this person, and I also have many regrets about my time teaching, and especially my first years of teaching. And I think that I grew in my empathy and understanding as I gained experience. But I do feel like it's all about the school culture and the training of teachers, and that's something that could easily be changed. That if teachers have more professional development, it really wasn't that I was resistant to this. I just didn't know. And I didn't, you grow up with your understanding of behaviors and of what you think a student should look like, and when you see a student that's really thriving, great. You want to take credit for that, and when they're not, then, they're doing something wrong. And to change that mindset and understand that mental health, is going to be this enhancement for all of our students. That's a culture shift in the school, that we can just see it as an enhancement that any person can benefit from. And then to teach the teachers and all of the staff that are going to be involved with the students on how to recognize the symptoms, and it's just a switch that can change everybody's understanding. For me, that's what it was. And if I were in the classroom and dealing with students, it would be a different picture today than it was 10 years ago. And I think that public awareness is also growing. So I think that you're going to start to see a change, but it can definitely be sped up with bringing in programs like this and professional development. The first day that teachers are back in the school, that is as important as where the exits are and where they're parking and what programs are in the curriculum. It's going to be on day one for orientation of new teachers and pushing for that. I think parents pushing for that. I know the PTA is strongly behind this. We've worked with the National PTA, and this is one of their top priorities. So having your local PTA push for this type of professional development and programming in the school could be an avenue.
We have time for just one final question before wrapping up. Is there someone with one final question?
Okay, come on down. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation this morning. I think I just want to kind of piggyback on what the wonderful parent over here was speaking about. I want to address the issue about stigma within the school systems in the sense that if a child has a developmental challenge or a physical challenge, there's a lot of supports. If a child has a mental health challenge, there's not as many supports. I think we talked a lot about teachers, and teachers need more professional development. That's a luxury in many schools that we don't necessarily get. We talk about the evolution of school climate. I also want to hear a little bit about what your thoughts are about engaging parents as advocates, not just parents who have children with behavioral health challenges, but other parents. I'll give you a concrete example. When I sit around the table at these focus groups for parents, I'm a parent as well, of 2 pre-adolescent children, and all you hear about is the parents say, those problem kids, they're keeping my kid from getting educated. What are you doing about those problem kids? They would not say that if a kid was in a wheelchair. They would not say that if a child had to leave because they had an asthma attack. They would not say that if a child had some kind of developmental disability. And I'm wondering if you've had any experience around how to engage parents, not just parents with the challenge, with the mental health challenge of the child, but the parents who are influencing the teachers, the administrators. These are problem kids. You know, back in the day, there was detention school, and I heard that, I'm not lying. And it's a really scary thing, because if we want to change cultural norms within a school, we have to also engage parents in a meaningful kind of way, because those, bottom line is, that's who, the loudest parents, that's who the school is listening to, right? So I just want to know your thoughts around that, and also ways to include stigma as an issue, because parents are ashamed to admit that their kid has a mental health challenge. They might be okay saying they have a developmental disability, but there's a shame associated with it. It's a shame with adults. But it makes it difficult for parents who are not, who don't know what they don't know, to advocate for their child. And I'm wondering if there's a way to motivate the supporting parents around them, and what your thoughts are around that.
So let me just quick, because and summarize the question, because I worry that your voice faded at times from the mic. The question was for everyone, how to engage all parents, especially parents of children who don't identify as having any kind of special health care need or behavioral health need, as a way to reduce stigma and to create a culture that is more welcoming and more sensitive to the needs of all kids, and therefore more supportive of helping all kids in their development. So suggestions on how to change that culture and engage all parents.
It's the $64,000 question, and I think that pointing to the stigma that's the core of the problem. And the good news is that in my what's now getting to be a long career, I've really seen the stigma of mental illness decrease, and the fact that we're having this meeting. 20 years ago, we probably wouldn't, or there'd be only 15 people in the audience. So that's the good news, and there's nobody we have to thank more than Patrick, who has done a huge service to the patients and professionals in terms of bringing the mental health issues to the fore and talking openly about them. So I think that we have to do that in our personal lives, be open and talk about our experiences the same we would talking about an orthopedic problem. So modeling this kind of openness and, hey, this is just part of life. And show me a family that doesn't have a mental health issue involved in it, and I'll show you somebody who's blind, because it affects us all, and we have to recognize it and treat it just as any other problem in life. How do I involve parents? Just by talking and being open about it and interested. That's the best thing I can say.
Yeah, I would agree. I think as we talked about earlier, framing part of this as helping students to reach their potential, because nobody wants to feel like mental health services are a punishment for something that they've done, but that, you know, it's something that's going to help bring us all closer to achieving our goals, is really a key piece in making people feel comfortable with it. You know, if we were all here saying, how are we going to, what's the surefire way to, you know, have our kids get A's, if that were the title here, and we still talked about mental health, then everybody might be filling the seats. But talking about it in that way, where we're bringing it as an addition, as a way that we can help students to be more effective, help teachers being more effective in the classroom. So part of it may be in the framing of our discussion. I think time, obviously, it's not going to happen overnight, and getting people to change their thinking. But the more that we're comfortable with talking about it as professionals in the space, you know, are teachers comfortable with sharing? Is the school comfortable with having people talk about their own issues and disabilities? And do we have models and examples that are showing us that even with that we can still be successful? So do we bring in those examples within our classroom? Do we talk about it? Is it embedded into any of our curriculum? We don't want to, you know, burden teachers with more to teach, but why isn't this a part of our health class, that we're talking about our brain, our emotional hygiene, that we are talking about it in, you know, phys ed as part of our, how does mood relate to activity? How do we take care of ourselves and our body? Why aren't we talking about it in biology class? So in so many places that we could be talking about how we're taking care of ourselves and why this is important for all of us, I think we could change that conversation too.